You talked about the linkage of Apala to Islam.
Yes.
In your book. And I like the way you put it here. You said at first, Apala was circumscribed around the Islamic social stratum of the Yoruba society.
Exactly.
So the musicians who sang it engaged a mixture of traditional African music, accentuated with Islamic renditions, thus achieving a blend that was neither totally Islamic, not wholly traditional, but nevertheless assumed to have achieved a successful Islamization of traditional music.
Exactly.
Ayinla was a Muslim.
He was a Muslim. Virtually all of them were Muslims. Haruna Ishola was a Muslim. Yusuf Olatunji used to be a Christian, also became a Muslim. And most of their songs, they especially in the 50s, in the 60s, it was only in the 70s, when, and then in the 50s, 60s, when they started singing this, the Apala song. It was believed that it was specifically an Islamic song. And many Christians, so they didn't have Christian fans as much as they should have. I think in the 70s, singers of that genre of traditional music began to reduce its heavy load of Islam. For instance, this particular song, Aramo kan lulesin. I don't know if I got it right. Ilu besinge o otima lo besinge. Ayinla Omowura also sang that song. They were saying that, look, the people from Mecca are the ones who own Islam. And that singing, because as at that time, they were saying that Apala musicians, Shakara musicians were polluting Islam by singing their genres of music. Because before then, most of those Apala musicians, you see them reciting the Quran, especially when they wanted to begin their songs. People like Lefty Salami. Lefty Salami, his name was actually Salami Balogun of Isaleiko. You had people like Atun, people like, of course, Yusuf Olatunji and all that, who were singing the Shakara genre of traditional African music. So it was it was believed to be an Islamic song. But as at the time in the 70s, when they began to reduce the high dosage of Islam in their songs, Christians began to also listen to them and to find out that, look, there was a preponderance of traditional Africa in those songs, and the infusion of Islam into it was just mild.
You use the term here, both religions later deployed it as a form of social entertainment.
Exactly. And then you see, when you first listen to most of these songs, Shakara, Apala, what is going to put you off is a geographical nature. They were always praise-singing, praise-singing one kind of, maybe somebody who had risen from the lower stratum of society and rose to build a house, also bought a Peugeot or Loye, a 504 Peugeot car, and it was like an in-class celebration of sales. So they began to praise-sing them. And then in one of his live songs, Ayinla Omowura sang, he said, he provided the basis for the praise-singing. He said, irunmu lowo kò ṣàì hànṣẹ́ anybody pé kò máa ṣe fatu ẹni fún mi lówó máa ṣàpọ́nlé wọn. He said, look, morning, pulling out a naira note from your pocket to give a musician is akin to trying to remove a strand of your mustache. That is painful trying to remove it. And because it's painful to give musicians money, whoever gives me money, I'm going to sing their praises. He provided a very brilliant explanation, for that engagement.
Even in the foreword of the book, the way Ebenezer Obadare,
Yeah, Professor Obadare,
described how his upbringing, where he grew up.
No, let me shock you. Ebenezer Obadare, I told you that I started listening to Ayinla Omowura. In fact, I was listening to Ayinla Omowura. I was listening to Alhaji Dauda Ekbuakara. In fact, most of those who knew me then told me that if I was to write the biography of any musician, it should have been Ekbuakara, because I knew so much about, and there's none of Ekbuakara's music that I cannot sing. And so, even Ayinde Barrister. So, but at some point, I gave up. Not that I gave up totally. I also started becoming, modernity started taking hold of me. And so I veered towards reggae music. And, even when I was at the University of Lagos writing about Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Bonnie Livingston, writing for them, about them in newspapers. I remember in 1990, I wrote for Punch, Bob Marley a decade after, which Punch published for about 4 or 5 pages. It was a Saturday. So I literally abandoned traditional African music and was known, to be a reggae aficionado. But in when was that? I think so I got to Tribune, 1995, sometime around 1999. Ebenezer Obadare, he had just finished his master's in Ife. He was lecturing in the Department of History and became an editorial board member of the Tribune. I had known him in my days in Elisha. So, and one day we were on the editorial board and he suggested that we should write an editorial comment on Ayinla Omowura. And I looked at him. An editorial comment on Ayinla Omowura, and then he argued his point and the board accepted it. And he wrote that editorial comment. And so since then, I decided I was going to flaunt my Ayinla Omowura. I was no longer going to hide him any longer. If a scholar like Ebenezer Obadare could flaunt and even suggested and got written an editorial comment on Ayinla Omowura, then who? And so when I went to Enugu in 2004, I decided to pack all my cases to Enugu, and I wrote my first piece on Ayinla Omowura for The Guardian. Guardian published it. The title of the piece was Ayinla Omowura, something years after the Siba riot. I think maybe 23 years after this, or 24 years after the Siba riot. 4 or 5 pages. And people started calling me. So you knew that much about this musician? And then it occurred to me that some of them were telling me, why don't you write a book about this man? And so the consciousness about writing a book on Ayinla Omowura started growing until my friend Ganiyu, he's late now, Waid Ganiyu, who also used to read my articles, found me out and said, look, doctor, let's write a book on Ayinla Omowura. I said, Ayinla Omowura. And so he kept on, prodding me. And then that was how I started. Got a research assistant, was also going to Abeokuta, going to Lagos. I went to interview Kollington Ayinla, interviewed so many people, and that was how the book was born. So, Ebenezer Obadare, you needed to listen to him and let him talk to you about Ayinla Omowura.
I took time to read. I read his foreword about 3 times.
Because he grew up in Odoro. Odoro in Elisha.
Yes.
It's a place where not only the downtrodden, the rascally in society lived.
The way he wrote the foreword, and I said, okay, Ayinla appealed mainly
Yes.
to the low class.
Exactly.
At that time.
Exactly. But now the upper class of society has snatched Ayinla Omowura from the low class now.
Why did the low class allow that?
I don't know. Apparently, the upper class of society saw beyond ordinary music in Ayinla Omowura. They saw what appeals to them. They saw philosophy. They saw wisdom. They saw a reinvention of folklores of society. You know, the low class maybe the rhythm could attract the lowly placed class of society. But the people like us see beyond the rhythm. We see wisdom. We see, look, let me shock you. Many times, I remember this particular column that I wrote some few months ago. I was in some kind of quandary. I didn't know what to write. And I was driving to Ibadan Recreation Club. And I was listening to this particular song. And the lyrics caught my attention. And that I could relate it to the particular, and I was almost remembering that particular piece. That I could link that song to that issue that I needed to establish. And when I linked the two of them up, people read that piece, they said, fantastic. So Ayinla Omowura, whenever I'm dry as a writer and I needed inspiration, I just need to go play my music, Ayinla Omowura. I will see an issue, either through Proverbs, through explanation of society that will fit into today, and that I could write and that the world will see something different from.